Okay, on this call we are responding to a single vehicle that's into a pole. As you can see in the video here, the ground is a little wet, so probably somebody lost control somehow and slid into a pole. So far we're getting that there's not a lot of injuries. There's only one single occupant in the vehicle, so we're going to go ahead and see what we get when we get there. Some things to think about, of course, is entrapment, your common neck and back injuries for any MVA, thinking about whether or not the driver was restrained, airbag deployment, windshield spidering, vehicle compartment intrusion, loss of consciousness of the patient, all these type of things to try to take into consideration when you're responding to a call like this. Unless you get more information, you might think about trauma centers, calling for helicopter transport should the patient, need that. So as we're going, if we get any more information, we'll go ahead and request additional resources if needed. But as of right now, all we're getting is one single occupant in the vehicle that struck a pole that they lost control of the vehicle. So we're going to see what we get when we get there. Other things you might want to consider as well going through a call like this is, of course, scene safety. As you can see, the ground is wet. We have to be careful responding to this type of an assignment, and when we get onto scene, think about other emergency vehicles responding, including us, and making sure that we get there safe and other responders get there safe as well. So we'll go ahead and end this here. We're going to be there in about 30 seconds or so, and I'll let you know what we found and what we did on the other side.
1 to start, 76, 73.
Okay. On this call, it's actually a pretty interesting call wound up being. The gentleman who was driving his vehicle wound up a deer jumping out in front of him. He lost control of the vehicle in the wet roadway, wound up striking a pole. Now, it wasn't too much damage to the vehicle. There was no airbag deployment. There was no intrusion to the passenger compartment of the vehicle. He was a single occupant. Initially just a little shaken up, but as we were responding, he started complaining of some neck and back pain, some shoulder pain. So the first responders on scene, the fire department, wound up boarding and collaring this gentleman just before we got there. So as we were getting there, he was pretty much getting all packaged up. We just brought a stretcher over, got him on the stretcher into the ambulance. So they did a great job packaging him, really great board and collar job. So I applaud them for that. It made our job a lot easier, got the patient off the scene a lot faster, and made things a lot better overall. The interesting part was that this is a man who had previous injuries to his neck, where he had some paralysis already to part of his body, so that made assessment a little difficult to find out if there's anything new going on. In addition to that, he's actually had some increase in some pain recently regarding this previous injuries and other medical issues he's got going on that he was recently at his doctor for. He was actually coming from his doctor just before this happened. So he's got some chronic pain going on, some flare-ups for new pain that's coming on, and now he's got pain and discomfort from this accident. So it made it a little bit difficult to try to pinpoint. So it took a lot of questioning for this gentleman. He's an elderly gentleman, about 60 years old, and it made it a little bit difficult to kind of pinpoint what was new from the accident he was just in and his previous injuries and previous medical conditions. So it took a lot of questions. There's a type of call where, while there's not a lot of life-threatening things going on, his vital signs are good, he had no LOC, he had a seatbelt on, not a lot of damage to the vehicle, he was traveling about 30 miles an hour or so. So while there's not a lot of life-threatening things going on, no major life and death situation happening, it does encourage you to take time and the effort to really kind of sit down, think about the type of questions you're going to ask this patient to make them more direct, yes and no type questions, so that he understands what you're trying to ask him and doesn't kind of meld in all these previous injuries and previous aches and pains and chronic pains he has into the new aches and pains. Now, he did have one injury previously that was kind of aggravated by the accident. So that, of course, you have to note, because he's got increased pain to that area secondary to this accident. So even though it's a chronic pain, it's becoming aggravated from the accident, so it's something that has to be looked at. So, documentation is very important so that the ER knows what's going on, especially when it comes to paralysis from a previous neck and back injury, so they don't think it's something acute that just happened from an accident and they start a whole thing because now he's got paralysis and he was just in an MBA. So simple treatment, board and collar, oxygen, you're going to go ahead and do your vital signs. The whole ALS as far as IV, things like that is pretty much a choice, and of course going by your local protocols what you want to do for a patient like this. But primarily you want to make sure you document all his complaints, any changes on the way to the hospital. In this case, he started having some additional complaints with some shoulder pain and things like that, but nothing obvious was shown. There's no obvious deformities. There was no obvious bruising or bleeding or anything like that. He had great distal pulses and all that, so it was pretty much just the chief complaints that he had of the pain and discomfort. So it's just important to make sure you document appropriately and get all the stuff going on. Maybe mention some of his previous injuries and previous pain complaints and the new complaints so that the ER can compare them if they look at your report and make sure that you didn't miss something, and you kind of document that you as a provider were aware of the previous pain complaints and previous injuries, and that you didn't just pile them on to the new complaints of pain and injuries. So an interesting call. I hope that maybe some tips you might have gotten here as far as documentation. Calls like this can wind up being a lot worse than what this one was, of course. And this is again one of those calls where you're not getting a lot of information in response. But upon arrival, you've got to go ahead and take the scene into consideration, look at the vehicle for appropriate damage and any type of mechanism that you might want to go ahead and report to the ER. Well, this is Jim Hoffman from the Virtual Response Medic, and as always, stay safe.